Well, today we're talking about small groups. Are they really necessary for the local church? If you already have a Sunday school, do we really need to add more small group ministry? And what are the keys to harnessing your congregation's collective strength for the Great Commission? We're going to discuss all of that and more today on the Five Gifts podcast. You're listening to the Five Gifts podcast, a weekly show designed to equip leaders in the Spirit-filled church. I'm Bruce Ritter, and along with my co-host Charles Russell, we offer insights for leading the local church in the fullest expression of Jesus. If you're interested in learning more about practical theology, the gifts of the Spirit, and spiritual disciplines, this is the show for you. Welcome to the Five Gifts podcast.
Welcome to the Five Gifts podcast. Thrilled that you're here today with us. Want to wish all the dads a happy belated Father's Day. Hope you've recovered and rested from your day of being honored and celebrated yesterday. We had a great Father's Day around here. A great morning of ministry, church in the Charlotte area, Charlotte, North Carolina area, and then after that, it was just a full-on Father's Day celebration at Russell Headquarters Central. Bruce. And so, the family just outdid themselves. Great meal. They even let me cook the steaks on the grill. So, that's an honor for any dad. And they made one of my favorite desserts, a chocolate eclair cake, and made sure we had some left over because a little bit later today, I'm going to go celebrate Father's Day all over again with some leftovers. But we had a great Father's Day, and I hope everyone listening, hope you enjoyed your Father's Day celebration as well. Bruce, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. Boy, the weekend for us is huge, and it always is in June because my daughter, her birthday is on June 15th. And my birthday is actually today, and of course, right between them is Father's Day. Yeah, thanks. But I remember when my daughter was born, it couldn't have worked out better for me. My wife was glad when my daughter was born, believe me, but she had to do all the work. But my daughter was born on June the 15th. And then, of course, my birthday was 2 days later. But my daughter was actually born on Father's Day of that year, back in 2003. So, that's always a fun time of the year. And my wife and daughter, they always make a big deal because Father's Day and my birthday are together. So they throw in some combined gifts. And this year, unexpectedly, totally didn't have it on my radar, but they gave me a new Blackstone grill for my birthday. So I got to season it on Friday and had it all put together. I actually cooked on it Friday night after I got everything seasoned and then and made something else the next night. So I'm enjoying the Blackstone right now. Great Father's Day birthday gift.
Well, it sounds like the Five Gifts podcast may take a foray into the culinary arts. I feel some good things coming on.
Oh, and my wife, man, for my daughter's birthday, my wife's an excellent cook, and she made an almond joy cheesecake in it.
Oh, wow.
I'm still drinking water to to get that sweetness back down because it was delicious, but man, it's so rich and good. You're enjoying every bite of it, and then afterwards you're thinking, gosh, I can't wait to get over this misery so I can have another piece. It's just a wonderful misery. We're talking about small groups today, and Charles, this is going to be a two-parter. Sounds like we've got enough information, material, and content. I think that's relevant for the local church. We're going to spend 2 weeks on this, but just to get us started, Charles, how should we define small groups in the local congregations? A lot of misconceptions, I think, about small groups. So, how should we define small groups for the local church?
Sure. Well, as we begin to think about and discuss small groups, at the heart of small groups, at the heart of the church, at the heart of our Christian faith is relationship with God, relationship with others. That stands as the essence of Christianity and salvation. In fact, we call it the Great Commandment, but we're instructed to love God and to love people. And you can't do either one of those without being in relationship. It requires relationship. And we believe that probably the greatest way for relationships to develop and to occur and to be cultivated is in a small group environment or a small unit environment. So small groups are all about relationships, building relationships with God and with one another. Secondly, when we talk about small groups and we think about the context of the local church, small groups function as family-like gatherings. And at these gatherings, or through these gatherings, rather, love, care, nurture, communication. And when we say communication, primarily sharing. The individual has the opportunity to share and to be vulnerable, to be transparent. And then so the small group provides an environment for love, care, nurture, and sharing. And through that, through those means, small groups can hold each other accountable within the church. So you just think about those components there, and you can see the power of small groups. People being loved, people being cared for, people being nurtured, people being given a safe place to communicate or to share, to be vulnerable, and then an environment where each group member can be held accountable within the church. And so you're talking about a powerful dynamic that comes into play through small groups. And anyone who's ever led a church understands that to cultivate this kind of environment and to get people engaged in these kind of dynamics that we're talking about, that proves extremely difficult to happen or to occur in a large group setting. But it is when we break the larger group down into smaller groups or smaller units that that vulnerability, that trust, that openness, and that dialogue and discussion begins to take place. Another aspect, as we're defining small groups, we can begin to think about gathering. These are some words that really describe the ministry of and the work of small groups. So words like gathering, connecting, attaching, networking relationships. That's the crux of the ministry work of small groups. So if you're weak in that area in the church, or if you're wanting to grow in that area, begin to kind of dial in your efforts, begin to dial in and fine tune those activities that revolve around gathering, connecting, attaching, networking relationships. That's the language of small groups that describe the work and ministry of groups. And then what kind of small groups are there? And so this is not an exhaustive list, but we can kind of identify 8 to 9 types of small groups that begin to emerge as being prominent in the church. So I'm going to kind of talk about this list, but begin to think about in the church where you serve. Begin to think about how these groups are probably already in existence. We'll talk a little bit later about beginning to network these existing relationships. So 8 or 9 types. You've got things like leadership. So as you look at the leadership groups, who are the leaders in the church, that can be networked into a small group. Groups that do tasks like ushers or greeters. You may have a finance team, in any number of teams that are doing tasks. you can begin to think of them as a small group. There can be ministry groups. You have a worship team. You have a team. You may have a team of Sunday school teachers, and that could be in another type of group as well. Another category, education. There might be Sunday school groups there, growth groups. You may do some type of an institute or growth track for folks in your church. Another category could be self-help. We see groups for or ministries that are serving those who have struggles with addiction or those who are in recovery. We have care groups. Those can be fellowship type groups. You may have a group of people in your church that kind of have a loosely formed supper club. Maybe they rotate Friday nights and just in each other's homes having a potluck or kind of a covered dish fellowship. I mean that could be any number of things, but we're thinking fellowship. Another category, evangelism. So community service. You may have some community service groups that are just kind of loosely formed and functioning. In fact, in our area where we live, there's a church here in town. They have a group of senior citizens of men who are all retired, and I don't know if they're considered a small group in their church. They kind of treat it as a ministry, but they find people in the community who might need like a handicap ramp built to their home, and they go in and they raise the funds to buy the materials. If the homeowner can't afford that, they work on budget with materials. They come in and as a group, they provide the labor and they build handicap ramps for people in our community who are in need for that. So what a wonderful evangelism group that is, who serves the community. And then last category could be a recreational or an interest type group. So sports teams, you may have a softball team, and they just think they're there to win the World Series of church league softball. But you can begin to form them and treat them as a small group. A former church I served in as a staff pastor, we had an exercise class that met every Wednesday evening, and they did cardio and all those kind of things, kind of a group aerobics class. And so we began to talk to the instructor and to the leadership of that collection of people. Let's begin to treat this like a small group. So there's 8 or 9 or so kind of categories or types of small groups that are probably already functioning in your church, whether they're in a formalized system or not. These are kind of some types and categories of groups that are probably prevalent in most local churches. So,
Charles, when I hear you bring that up, one thing that stands out to me is that small groups are not simply an add-on, a layer of ministry in the church. They are already in the church. You already have small groups.
Yeah,
I think that's confusing to some pastors because I believe that they see small groups as a one-dimensional add-on ministry to their church, where they're doing maybe it serves a single purpose. They think of small groups being the fellowship group, or maybe it's a discipleship group, but they see that as something they have to develop and add on, when the truth is all churches have small groups, because the dynamic, organic nature of relationship brings people together. And I think what you're talking about, and what we're going to talk about further, has to do with those dynamics that you put in place and you develop as a leader, so that small groups are serving those relational essentials in the local church. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. And, when as you read through a lot of the small group literature that's out, kind of a theme that through a lot of the small group learning and info that's available, you kind of come across a term that says, "Are you going to be a church of small groups, or are you going to be a church with small groups?" And I think for many leaders, we choose the route that you're talking about. We say we'll just be a church with small groups, and so, like you said, small groups becomes a program, or it just becomes kind of an appendage that we try to attach to this local body. And I think what you and I are going to advocate for in this kind of two-part series on small groups is to move from being a church with small groups to becoming a church of small groups, and saying, all right, there's more than singular. There's more than just a singular function of groups in the body. It's more than just a discipleship group. It's more than just a care group. But I think what we're going to say, directly or indirectly, is that the five gifts can be facilitated through small groups in the local church. The entire church can be organized and structured through small groups, and apostolic gifts, prophetic gifts, pastoral, teacher, evangelist gifts, all five of the gifts of Christ can be released and facilitated through small groups. So the small groups stop being an appendage or an afterthought, and they become the conduit by which the supernatural gifts of the Spirit they flow into and through and around the church. So Bruce, help us out, man. I've tried to give us somewhat of a definition, but can you help us out with some theology about small groups and the life of the church?
Sure. I think the Bible gives us a picture of small groups that demonstrate just how essential and integral it is to all the kingdom, and especially that expression of the local church. And Charles, what you bring up, I think, is important, because small groups, people think of small groups as a programmed element of church life, when the reality is it's a very organic and dynamic reality in church life. Relationships are happening. We're wired to be relational people.
Yeah.
And the Bible, I don't think the Bible is making any kind of statement outside of that reality. I think it's saying, listen, we assume that relationships are vital to life, and they are definitely part just in the development and the growth of the local church. And the thing that stands out to me is that small groups are essential because relationships are essential.
Mm-hmm.
That really is the driving force behind small group ministry, is that we're wired for relationship. We're created for relationship. God himself exists in relationship.
Yeah.
Even from the beginning verse of scripture in Genesis 1, that the centrality of relationship in the local church. But at creation, it's God the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. And it says in the beginning, God, Elohim, that plural name for God. Even though he's one, he exists in three. And in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So that in tandem partnership of the triune Godhead, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, definitely a mystery, definitely not something easily parsed out. But you see that God's very nature is one of interrelatedness, interconnectedness. And I struggle to say interdependent, because I don't want to reduce God. He's self-existent, and yet he works in partnership. And so anything that he is developing in us, because we're created in his image, I think we are misguided to think that we can do life alone. We need relationships, and that certainly is a foundational understanding of the church, that because God works in relationship, the church exists in relationship. And that leads into the two great commandments that Jesus brought up in Matthew 20:22 that, you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. You exist in relationship with God, and it requires it's demanding of your person, your life, your strength, your soul, your heart. But the same is also true of our relationships with people. God has commanded us to be in relationship with people. Love your neighbor as yourself. Your neighbor can be across the street. It can be across town. It can be across the aisle in your local church. But we exist in relationship, and we're wired for that. So when Jesus was on the earth in ministry, even that sense of the Father's missional work through him, at his baptism, when Jesus was baptized by John and the Holy Spirit comes down on Jesus, and the Father speaks, you have that picture of the Trinity there initiating. Jesus began to do the work of the kingdom. He began to preach the gospel of the kingdom and heal the sick and cast out devils, and preach the gospel of the kingdom. And so even that was the initiation of again, just like it was at creation, that in tandem work of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So Jesus modeled that relationship. And then, the many accounts where he anoints the disciples and sends them out, whether it's the 12 or the 70 or the 120, he always did that in relationship, in going 2 by 2, going together, doing ministry together. So he modeled, not only did he model that in his relationship with the Father. Remember in John, they're asking by what authority he speaks these things. And he says, listen, I'm only telling you what I hear the Father saying. So the ministry flowing out of that relational connectedness. I mean, we go on, but it's clear that Jesus, not only did he modeled that, but he commanded that of the early disciples.
Yeah.
The New Testament church, when they get together on the example of and the teaching of the apostles, the New Testament church, they gathered together first, gathering in the temple because they were Jewish people who believed in the Messiah, but they continued to go to temple, and yet they found the need to work together, to fellowship together in house to house kinds of settings, small group environments. Anything we tend to think so technical about, and today there's such a big home church movement, and I think that in some cases the home church movement, and I'm not here to make a call. I don't want anyone to take me the wrong way, but I really think the home church movement is partly this thirst for authentic relationship. It's not that you can't have authentic relationship in the local church, but I think there's such a thirst for it and such inadequacy maybe in some expressions in the local church that people are gravitating toward home church. But that was happening in the beginning. The larger church meeting together in smaller settings. And this is important and pretty foundational not only to this episode, but in our whole podcast, we are so informed by Ephesians, and I think it's worth mentioning, Charles. We've said this. We'll say it again. We reserve the right to keep bringing it up.
Yeah.
But Ephesians is Paul's revelation of the church. It's not the only revelation of the church, but it's such a foundational one because of Paul's contribution to New Testament theology. And I think we fail to realize is that this is Ephesians, the book of Ephesians is Paul's revelation of the church, and he's writing this and distributing this and teaching this before the book of Acts is written. I mean, the history of Acts is there, but no one has a recorded history of it until after Paul writes Ephesians. And so there's such a foundational element to what Paul is writing to us in Ephesians about the church. And it's the same thing, that the church exists in relational connectedness with a multiplicity of leadership of apostles and prophets and evangelists and pastors and teachers. For what purpose? To equip the body, to relate to the body, to raise the body up. And that clear picture in verse 16 about the body being connected and growing together to the measure of the stature of Christ's fullness. I mean, the church exists in relationships. In fact, we could say when the church is not existing, it's not existing because relationships are not present.
Yeah.
So I tend to overstate my case sometimes. I'm pretty animated on that. But Charles, when you think of Paul's revelation of the church as a body, I mean, that feels significant, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what does that revelate? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it's definitely significant. It's critically important to the understanding of small groups, and again, moving away from the idea of a program into a reality. This local church is there are small groups resident in this church, and as pastors, as church leaders, we have to. I believe we really need to embrace Paul's revelation of the importance of relationships within the body. I mean, that's a major paradigm that Paul uses to describe the church is the body of Christ, and the body works in relationship with itself. You know, every body part, and I'm not trying to be cliche, and but every body part has its place and has its function within the larger body, and it has to work in relationship with each part for the whole to function. And I really, man, I just really love what you're bringing out about the DNA of God being resident in us as His people, and that we're built and we're designed to live in relationship. There's just a natural longing and desiring for us as humans to be in relationship with other people, whether you're extrovert or introvert, or wherever you kind of fall on that scale. Within us, there's just a natural default that says, that we have to be in relationship with one another, and I think it's just a critical need that the church is not addressing, and that for the church to move forward, I think the churches that will move forward successfully. And again, you and Jesus have to define what success is in your local church, but obviously in evangelism, seeing the lost saved, and seeing new people connected into the church, and seeing existing relationships connected in the church. I mean, these are elements these are relational elements that happen within the church, and seeing churches thrive in the relational aspect of church life. Those churches are going to they're going to do small groups well, because the human element here is longing and desiring for relationships. Before COVID, I mean, it's always been there, but I just noticed several years before COVID happened that people, that just seemed to be a glaring need to me. And maybe I just woke up one morning and matured a little bit and could kind of see the world outside of my own agenda and dreams. But as people were coming into our church, people were desperate for connection. They were desperate for relationships. These are people who were churched people, who were in relationship with Christ. But even those who were what we would say pre-Christians, just as human beings, they were coming into our church and were desperately seeking friendship, and that did not wane or diminish. That, in my mind, in my opinion, just an observation, those longings just continue to increase and intensify as I would watch and interact with new people, and even with existing people in the church, just longing to be in a relationship and to have connection. And then after COVID, since COVID, I think that's only intensified. I think people are desperately seeking connection, relationship, friendship, friend and family like relationships. And what is there a better place than the local church? In my mind, no. I think the local church should be the number one place where people can come and find friend and family like relationships. It can be connected in, and so, man, I know I'm taking a long time to talk about this, and I'm probably just talking in circles. So please forgive me for that. But Paul's understanding of relationships in the body, the importance of that in today's culture in 2000, this is 24, man, it has not lost any significance, nor has it lost any weight. It is critically important that as churches we take up this mantle of relational connectedness, and we massage it, and we work this into every area of our church, even if we don't have a formalized system of small groups, recognizing those groups that are in our body and beginning to work those groups. So uh anyway, that's my soapbox. I get pretty
Charles,
passionate about small groups too, Bruce. So uh
Charles, let me ask you something.
yeah.
When you think of something as earth shaking as COVID was,
Hmm.
what does that reveal to us about the necessity of relational connectedness, especially in the local church?
Well, it is it is a source of strength that that is unrivaled and unparalleled in anything else that we find in this world. Um, I, does that make sense?
Sure
Um,
does.
the
Sure does.
strength of relational connectedness that we find, that we should find in the local church, man, it's unparalleled. Uh, it,
There's no substitute for it.
yeah, yeah. Man, I've heard in COVID. Um, well, I'll just say this. We were pastoring a church during COVID, and man, the Lord had really breathed on that church, and we saw great gains in numerical attendance and financial um, support, and all these different markers that you kind of look at. Uh, but there was also a great sense of being knit together by Christ to
Hmm.
form His body, and then COVID comes, and so now we're not meeting. But man, I'm telling you, my wife Juliana, I've talked about her these pastoral gifts resident in her. She pe- she really is the one that God used to kind of hold our church together, to keep us relationally connected. Um, but because we never lost momentum as a church in COVID, and a great part of that, I believe, is Juliana's. We were intentional as a couple leading the church, but Juliana's pastoral gifts that that highlighted care, that highlighted fellowship, um, and not in the sense of being able to gather together, but through some virtual environments, being coming together, praying for one another, setting up some structures whereby through texting and phone calls and different means, keeping the body connected. We all that to say, we never lost momentum. We
Hmm.
never lost strength in the church. We had to shift and we had to pivot, much like many churches did. But it was through smaller units, through smaller groups, through this relational connectedness that that strengthened our body during that time, and our church remained strong during a global pandemic. And man, I give praise to God for that, because he sustained that, but it was through his gifts, and through the strength that comes as the church is relationally connected. So to boil it all down, just the strength that you find in relational connectedness. And if I could offer just a personal example, just to be transparent and a bit vulnerable, it was through a small group environment that God really healed me, me personally. I just experienced probably the hardest season of vocational ministry that I had gone through and have experienced to this day. It was a very, very painful, and so I was processing a lot and reflecting a lot and thinking a lot and praying a lot, and all those things are great, and all those are all activities that individually we have to do. But on the heels of that kind of traumatic experience for me, I began my seminary education, and so pastors from all over the country, we convened once a month for 1 week a month for, I think it was around 14 months, to come and study. And man, we received just a world class Pentecostal seminary education. And I'm so thankful for the education. But the other part of that was just as powerful was the community that we developed as a cohort. It was a small group. The relationships that were formed, the relationships we built, the community that was developed, it brought healing to me. It brought strength to me. I was in a weak place. I was very weak when I started that. But man, I'm telling you, I found community. I found strength. I found healing in this seminary educational cohort that I had never experienced in my life. And man, I'm telling you, my life was marked, and it was changed. It is changed. That's why I'm so passionate about this idea of being relationally connected. Not because it's great theory in a book, but it's because I've experienced this. I've lived this out. I came as a person longing for connection. I came to. I didn't know I was going to find it in seminary, but I came to the Lord hurting, and He healed me. He healed me in a community of pastors who rallied around me. And man, they cared for me. They loved me. They nurtured me. They encouraged me. And through conversation, I found out that some had been through similar experiences. We were able to share, and man, there was just such a place of healing and a place of reforming, of reshaping. In fact, a mentor to both of us who was leading the cohort, he asked me one day, he says, "Charles, what has this educational cohort experience, what has that meant to you?" And I didn't say anything about the education. I said what this has meant for me, this has been salvation. And I didn't just throw that out loosely. I meant that. And there was sincerity in that statement. That educational cohort, that community that I found, that I thrived in, that was salvation for me. That was a place of deliverance, and that was a place of reshaping and reforming. And those are relationships that I still hold dear today, that I can call all across the country. And that same relational connectiveness and strength still exists. So,
wow, Charles, I want to just take a pause there, because I'm hearing your story, and at the same time, I'm putting together some other things that tend to happen, and they seem to be happening more frequently than I like to hear about. But you hear of people being dechurched, wounded because of, in their estimation, the church hurt them, the programming and the structuring
Mm-hmm.
and it's somewhere along the way an offense happened. And I'm not saying it was an illegitimate; it may have been very legitimate. But the fact that people step away from church because of woundedness, and you're sharing a story that I think is not just an ideal,
Mm-hmm.
and not something that's not uh, particularly special. It is very special. It is very inspiring to hear that that's in your ministry context. And yet I think that is supposed to be the norm. I think that is supposed to be the most life-giving element of the church when it comes to, aliens and strangers in a foreign land. This is not our home. And
Mm-hmm.
if you know Christ, or if you desire to know Christ, or desire to connect with God, man, it's like Jack Hayford would say. I think that life-giving element of the church can only be experienced in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And but that demands the hard work, I think, of putting together strong strong factors that facilitate relational connectedness.
Yeah.
Relational connectedness will happen, I think, where there is an intentionality about getting getting those
Mm-hmm.
those factors for connection in place, like small groups,
Yeah.
like leveraging even those relational networks, whether it be uh, the board, whether it be the worship team, whether it be the a team of greeters,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be a service small group that's doing outreach and evangelism, or whether it's a kind of a shared life experience small group. It doesn't just have to be discipleship. It doesn't have to be a Sunday school group,
Mm-hmm.
but where that group is connecting and showing the character of Christ, the humility, love, compassion, exercising the gifts of the Holy Spirit. I think that your experience in that setting is supposed to be the norm. I think that is supposed to be the ongoing, everyday testimony, as special and as wonderful as yours is. And I know that story. I got to see that unfolding for you,
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit during that time. But just to know that the local church is the place where that miracle happens. It should be the place where that miracle happens.
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage pastors to recognize the potential of your church. It's there because the life of Jesus is there. The
Mm-hmm.
anointing of the Spirit is there. It may just be getting people intentionally connected. It may take a lot of hard work on the front end, but the payoff can be huge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you're leading if you're leading the church with the hope and with the intent of seeing people's lives transformed by the power of God, then connecting people relationally is it's the way to go. Uh, there's anyway. I'm living proof, and, and we all have our stories. Um, it brings hope. It delivers hope. And it gives us hope. You mentioned as you're talking about being intentional in helping in developing kind of the small group relational connectedness in a body, and we do have to be intentional. It's not small groups form in our church informally, uh, and are loosely formed just by kind of natural relational uh, skills that we have as people. But if we're not intentional in beginning to form up a system, then that's only so far that those loosely formed relationships are going to take. with small groups being resident in a church, we have the opportunity to form up a system of small groups, so that we're intentionally becoming a church of small groups, and that system brings strength. It brings organization. It brings the life. It channels the life of the Spirit into the church. And so, as we talk about systems, a system of small groups, the small group system in a church, I think we could compare that to the skeletal system of the human body. When we think about the skeletal system, it connects, it networks the internal structure and framework, and it supports all functions of the human body. If we don't have the skeletal system in place, the bones, the ligaments, tendons, muscles, I mean, if we don't have those things in place, the body does not function. And so what the skeletal system does for the body, small groups and a small group system will do for the local body, for the local church. It will connect and it will network the internal relational structures and frameworks for all church functions. Again, to just repeat something I said earlier, a system of small groups will be a conduit. It will facilitate all five of the gifts of Christ that He's given to His church. And so, Bruce, I know you've got some thoughts and ideas on systems. Don't let me kind of hijack the thread here.
No, there is order, there is design, and just like I was just thinking of the old forget what it's not a nursery rhyme, but the old rhyming we do as a kid. The head bone is connected to the neck bone.
Mm-hmm.
The head bone's not connected to the leg bone. There is a sequence and an order for the body, and so as if the church is a body, and that's really one of the great revelations of Ephesians is that it is a body. It is connected by what every joint supplies. That human skeletal system provides the internal structure and framework that the body is supported.
Yeah.
And when the body is not connected, then the different parts suffer. Whether it's someone that's experienced grief and they're not getting their need met, they suffer when the connection doesn't exist for new mothers. They can suffer when those things are not attached and intentional and connected, that the needs of the body don't get met. When there's when relationships are not strong in the church, it's hard to make disciples, because one thing that we began saying in our church many years ago, and I don't think it's any great revelation, but it was kind of a galvanizing statement for us to understand in discipleship, that we grow through relationship. And you cannot grow as a believer without relationship.
Yeah.
You sit in a room all day long and study and read the scriptures and grow intellectually, but never expressing that in the context of relationships is going to hurt you. And so you need that. You need those elements. And so again, the body, the way it's designed, that skeletal system where people are connected, it's what releases the functioning and the growth of the whole body. Charles, what about the small group system? Talk about how that fits in this context that we're talking about.
Well, the small group system, again, as we're bringing structure, as we're bringing organization, as we're bringing strength into the local church, we're looking at kind of these loosely formed groups, and we want to begin to organize that into a system. And so you can go back and begin to look at those 8 or 9 categories of groups that we've talked about, and begin to look at, all right, here is kind of a grid uh, of groups that are functioning in the church. How can we begin to organize the church? And so now, you know, your team of ushers are not just simply doing a task, but they're being treated as a small group, and they're functioning as a small group. And so now they're moving from just kind of checking a box to facilitating the life of the Spirit, the life of Christ in a team of ushers. Oh, come on, Charles. They're just there to pass the plate, or they're just there to help help people find a seat, or whatever. Kind of minimalized thinking that we have about it. What ushers do. Now they're elevated, not them in personally, but they're how they're serving and leading in the church is elevated to the place of through their ushering, they're facilitating the work of Christ within the team. People now the ushers are being cared for. Now the ushers are being loved. They're being nurtured. They're finding healing as they're finding their place to belong, not just to serve, but to belong and be relationally connected in the body. I mean, you can extrapolate that and do that with all the ministry teams, with your board, with your worship teams, with your softball team. Are you serious? You're telling me that the softball team's got to gather around home plate and sing Kumbaya and cry some tears and no, I'm not saying that at all. If that's what you're doing, you're probably not winning very many softball games. but man, you can have to use a classic Pentecostal term. You can have revival on the softball field. You can build community within the team. Someone can go through a tragedy, and the team can rally around that individual. And now your first baseman, instead of just their purpose is to catch everything thrown to them, now they're finding healing, they're finding help, and they're finding hope in the midst of a divorce or in the midst of whatever has blindsided them. Yes, your softball team can continue just to play softball and be what it always has been, or we can begin to bring some structure to that and to bring some theology to the softball team. And now first base is a place of healing. Now the first baseman is not just somebody who's skilled at catching a softball. He or she is someone who has been healed through the pastoral gifts resident on that softball team. I don't want to get too far out here in left field, but just to say, if it's a softball team, if it's a cooking class, if it's a whatever the group is, begin to formalize that and train that and treat that as this is not just a place to come and learn a skill or to come and do a curriculum. This is a place of healing. This is a place that you're going to be loved, you're going to be cared for, that you can belong, that you can find friendship, even outside of the group or the class or the team. This is a place where you can find and experience the life and the body of Jesus Christ.
Charles, that's powerful. I want to be part of that softball team. And I don't like softball, but I want to be part of that team. Well, I think the maybe one of the keys, and this is certainly something we're going to get into next week, but I think we need to say that, that idea of connecting, and that's really what small groups, we're talking about small groups is that function of connecting and networking relationships. We don't like to think of networking as something that happens in church. We think of networking as something that happens in the professional world, it happens in the marketplace, it happens in the business world, but we're just talking about that manner in which we get people connected. And so in the small group, whether it's the softball team or whether it's the worship team or whether it's the greeters or the parking lot team. Those are small groups, and we want to put in, get this, we want to put in pastoral functions.
Yeah.
We want to put in someone that's facilitating, and in that group, maybe they're the leader, maybe they're looked to as the leader, they're formalized as the leader, and the leader needs to be responsible for harnessing the team and bringing together not only what they serve or what they teach or what their missional component is, but they want to make sure they're facilitating the connections that keep that group life-giving and afford those ministry opportunities. So they need to have a facilitator. They need to have someone that is doing some kind of hospitality. That can be the leader, but it can be someone else delegating. There needs to be someone that is facilitating care, where they're making connections outside of that ministry setting and encouraging those kinds of connections. Again, we'll get into more of those leadership roles that I think we should make part of every small group.
Yeah.
But the idea is that we're putting the pastoral gift into that group and letting that leadership be the driving point for healing, care, connection, and again, serving whatever function that small group has.
Yeah, absolutely. You have encapsulated it extremely well, Bruce, and so thank you for doing that. I tell you, man, I think we've had a great discussion on small groups, small group ministry, and being relationally connected here today on the Five Gifts podcast. And we just appreciate each and every one of you joining us today. Our time's up, and so we're bringing it to a close. But help us out. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, share, shout it from the rooftops. I mean, do everything you can. Tell the world about the Five Gifts podcast and connect yourself to our podcast as well, and just continue on the journey with us. We're so thankful that you're tuning in each week. Bruce, how can people connect with us personally?
Well, you can reach Charles at his website at charlesrussellministries.com or charlesrusselltraining.com. My website is coachingcardio.com, and we're always available to serve you. We have coaching services available. We have some training opportunities that are coming, and be paying attention, because there may be some pretty exciting developments on that front in the next couple of months. But we would love for you to reach out to us and let us know how we can help you in any way, because we're available. We want to be available to you, our listeners. Charles, next week we're going to keep talking about small group ministry and that activity in the local church. But we will see you next week right here on the Five Gifts podcast.
God bless.
You've been listening to the Five Gifts podcast. If you would like to take the next step as a spiritual leader, we invite you to visit either of our websites or contact us for leadership coaching. We can help you reach the next level in your own growth and leadership. We provide leadership, spiritual gift, and personality assessments to give you a better grasp of your leadership style. And we also create a customized growth plan that empowers you to reach your full kingdom potential. We can't wait to hear from you.